With that, it's my delight to introduce the next panel. It's about AI and marketing. We have two incredible people having a conversation together. Sir Martin Sorrell, who is on our advisory council and has redefined marketing over and over again, and is now the executive chairman of S4 Capital, is with us. And Professor Israeli, who runs our Consumer Intelligence Lab and is doing some incredible research about the impact of AI on marketing. Please welcome him.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's my absolute pleasure to have this conversation with Sir Martin.
You said that before we begin.
Yeah. It's always like that with you, I know. But I wanted to emphasize, maybe other people reflected the same way, but throughout every single session, everyone has been talking about marketing. If it's advertising, if it's creating copies, if it's product design, all of these things are...
I'm rechristening Ethan to Lethan, if you get my drift.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it is, yeah. I think it's probably the vertical, one of the verticals that's been most affected early in the disruptive process.
Right, so I'd like to hear from you as someone who is actually, on the ground, in the field. How do you see this actually affecting? Ethan fired his marketing agency, but how do you see this?
Yeah, okay, so it comes with a sort of a bit of a health warning, given what we've already heard. NVIDIA, we're sort of quite close to NVIDIA, obviously, in terms of what they're doing and building the capacity. And it really reminds me of Field of Dreams. I mean, remember Kevin Costner says, build it and they will come. And I think everything that you're hearing about today is in the context of massive capacity being built out. Obviously, there are doubts from a compute power and energy point of view as to whether there will be sufficient capacity, but it is very much build it and they will come. So the marketing area has really been affected, and everything I say is in the context of that. And I'll go through 5 things that we see already happening, probably in descending order of traction at the moment. And what we're seeing with clients, and we work mainly with tech clients, but we work with packaged goods clients, healthcare clients, et cetera. We're seeing what I would describe as a certain degree of hesitation. And if you talk to the chip manufacturers, or NVIDIA, for example, one of the things that they're very focused on is that in 2024 is the development of use cases. We've heard of some use cases. Ethan and others talked about in the last session, healthcare, obviously, heard about it too. But I would describe it as very much a testing phase at the minute. We're seeing a lot of clients do workshops, audits, they're tinkering. It was interesting to hear what somebody said in relation to Accenture, and I think the CTO of Accenture. If you look at it in the context of Accenture's revenues, the amount of billings and revenues they're generating is still small in the context of a $50–60 billion consulting business. So the first area is what has been touched on already, what I would call visualization and copywriting. So what took us 2 or 3 weeks, we can literally do in hours. And because we're in an industry that wrongly sells time or sells hours rather than sells outputs, and we are switching to selling outputs, that's a two-edged sword, because the client, particularly the procurement departments, will say to us, we'll have a piece of that. It's costing you less, it's taking you less time, it's costing less, it should cost us less. So that's, but we are seeing that, and I suppose, the sort of developments you've seen with Sorrell and Lightrix, an Israeli startup, which is doing similar text-to-video developments, tells you a little bit about what is happening in terms of writing ads, visualizing ads, whether it be stills or video. So that's one area where we've seen significant impact. The second area, which is related to that, and this I think is really important, and we're starting to see very significant traction at both a strategic level, I'll get into this in a second, and tactical level, is in what we call personalization at scale. Now, this has been around for a long period of time. It's what I call the Netflix model. Netflix is still the company that, I think a lot of people should, from a marketing point of view, should study, because in an era where first-party data is of critical importance, and there could have been a Y2K moment at the end of this year. Google has postponed deprecation of third-party cookies for I think the third time. It'll come in, but maybe 6 months or 12 months later. The essential thing that our clients have to do is to integrate their data, their first-party data gets over the privacy issues, the consumer consent issues, and have that in an ordered form. Most companies haven't done that. They've had different CTOs and CIOs who've done different systems. They've grown through acquisition. They don't have integrated platforms. Well, what Netflix did, or does, is produce personalized communications based on data insights from two sources. One is first-party data, and the second is signals from the platforms. And they know that Israeli likes football, or Marcelo likes football, and wants to see stuff about Girona or whatever it is, and they'll fashion, a Rebel Moon piece of content or a Narcos piece of content around football or sport. Know that you're interested in business, you on the Wall Street Journal site fashion it around business, and it's a personalized communication. Now, before the AI has been around since 2014, you've been working with Google since then on development of AI, so it's nothing new in a sense. But for a Netflix, we might produce in theory, 1.5 million different executions for a Narcos or Rebel Moon campaign. Today, with AI, we can probably do multiples of that. So you've seen a huge profusion of personalized communication. And what we're seeing now, and this is happening in real time, and we are seeing some very significant global companies start to look at that, is to have two-tier sort of creative development. You've got strategic upper funnel creative development, and then the practical implementation. They're building content factories. So, and of course, established companies, this is interesting, there's been some discussion about whether incumbents are under threat from AI or not. I was at the Goldman Sachs Technological Disruptors Conference, and interesting, a number of the speakers said the incumbents are at an advantage because they have two advantages. One is data, and two is distribution. And a lot of the incumbents have the data, and they have the distribution, and they have the content. And they, for example, agencies will have libraries of clients will have libraries of content where they can stack rank creative effectiveness by looking at the data and deploy it. So what you're starting to see is strategic creative, upper funnel stuff, big ideas, that being deployed into content factories that are being built, content studios are building at scale, for example, starting in the US, and then spun out globally. That is very big, and that in the first and second quarters of this year is getting a lot of traction. There's a lot of activity around that. So that's the second area. The third area is media planning and buying. Not much talked about it because the 6 holding companies who probably employ about 250,000 people in media planning and buying really don't want to go there. And it's just worth backing up a minute and explaining that the media industry, last year was about $950 billion industry. About 300 billion was in linear, network TV, radio, et cetera, magazines, old magazines and newspapers, and 650 was in digital. And again, the numbers are really important to understand. Google did about 225 billion of that. Meta did, despite the pressure they were under a year or so ago, 2 years ago, 125 billion, and Amazon did about 50, probably trending towards 100 billion. So you're talking about 350 billion out of the 650, the digital, out of the 950, the total, it'll be $1 trillion this year, was in the hands of the 3 big Western platforms. And then I'm not forgetting about Alibaba, Tencent, and TikTok or ByteDance. ByteDance is the only one that's really broken through. Again, remind you of the numbers. ByteDance this year, I think, will probably do about 120 billion, including China. TikTok, having done 90 last year, this is ad revenues, and TikTok this year probably will do about 35 billion. including the US, having done 20 the year before and 10 the year before that. So TikTok's the only one that's really broken through. Snap's about 6.5. Twitter was 5 before Elon got his hands on it, probably now doing about 2.5.
Yep.
And the Pinterest is around 4. So Walmart, 3 billion through retail. So I'm just giving you the rough size. Now that industry is ripe for disruption. The traditional holdcos, as I said, have about 250,000 people working on planning and buying. You know, my old company, WPP, probably has about 45,000 out of 100,000 employees on media in 3 networks, about 10 to 15,000 people in each network. You're not going to need 25-year-old media planners or buyers in the future. Bots will do it. And in the digital space, extremely effectively. I expect massive disruption of media planning and buying over the next 3 years, let's say. The other thing that's going to happen, which is related to what Ethan said, is the platforms are going to get much closer to the clients. There was I think it was an apocryphal story a few years ago that one of our major clients spoke directly, I won't say which platform, spoke directly to the sales director of one of the platforms and said, invited him to Detroit, so you might guess who it might well have been, and said to him, why don't we have a direct relationship? And he said, well, no, you know, I think to this day, Alphabet employs about 180,000 people. The biggest holding companies employ 133,000, and think about the relative sizes. So Google, Alphabet is a capital-intensive business. And the head of sales said, there's no point, because I just have to recreate the same number of people. Mm-hmm. With AI, that is not going to be the case now. So what you're going to see is clients work much more closely with the platforms. And there are 3 areas, I think, that are really relevant in terms of client abilities and indeed agency abilities in the future. The first is agility, because that's going to be the premium quality that's required on both sides. The second is taking back control. This gets back to what Ethan said. The simple fact is that the old agency model of outsourcing is not sufficient anymore. We have 3 models at S4. The first is an embedded model where we put people into the client. The second is the classic outsource. And the third is the in-house. Mm-hmm. With Sprint and with T-Mobile, it's a subject of a Harvard Business School case study. We in-house media at Sprint and then later at T-Mobile, specifically for that reason. So that area is absolutely huge. The fourth area is general efficiency. And you're going to see, you've heard it already today, on the client side and the agency side, and let me just give you one specific example. We have an exclusive arrangement with NVIDIA in outside broadcasting. So if a linear broadcaster wants to transmit to OB, outside broadcast, a football match, Girona versus Sorrell or Barcelona, wherever it happens to be, you'd need a truck. That truck will cost the company probably about $9 or $10 million. You could lease it. It would cost you even more on a capitalized basis. But if you capitalized it, you bought it, you'd have to write it off, say, over 5 years, $1.5 million a year. An AI-driven cloud solution costs $100,000 to $200,000. So you're talking about an 80 to 90% cost reduction for linear broadcasters at a time when they're under heavy pressure. So it's a good example of the sort of efficiencies. That's the fourth area. The fifth and final area is what I think is the most exciting, and that is what I call, somewhat maybe pretentiously, the democratization of knowledge. Organizations tend to be siloed. I'm sure that's not the case of anybody in this room. I'm sure that if any of you or your colleagues ring you up or email you or text you or even on the Slack channel say, you know, help me on this, they instantly drop what they're doing to help them. Outside this room, outside this hall, that is not the case. So breaking down the efficiency, and NVIDIA is really an interesting example. Their technology enables them to run a much more flatter organization and an organization with much wider control spans. You know, the classic would be, what is it? McKinsey might recommend 12 or 13 people as your direct reports. You know, NVIDIA is being run, for example, with much much wider, 40 or 50 direct reports, very little one-to-one meetings, and an emphasis on goals and achieving goals. I'm told that Jensen sets, 4 or 5 goals for people, for his direct reports, and it's almost progress chasing for implementation. So what AI is doing is really eliminating bureaucracy. And in my experience, the killer in organizations is politics with a small p, and the silos and the territories. And what we may be starting to see, I think, is AI start to drive knowledge, because the resistance to sharing is not at the lower levels in organizations, it's at the higher levels. Information is power, and it's blocked. I think the biggest things that we see in clients and agencies, the biggest blockers are the political issues. So I think that is probably the most powerful.
So let me latch on to that word of democratizing knowledge. So that sounds very exciting. And democratizing the ability to also do creative is something that is happening. And it also sounds exciting, but it also sounds very scary. Why do we need marketing agencies or any type of agencies in this era if I can just launch a bot to do all of it for me?
Well, you'll need validators. I mean, take the media side of it for a minute. It may well be. I mean, we started S4 sort of 5 years, 6 years ago. In our media planning and buying operation, we're purely digital. So we're doing digital content, we're doing data and digital media and digital transformation or marketing transformation. The relationship has always been very close with the platforms as a validator. You wouldn't give your media budget to Rupert Murdoch. No criticism of Rupert intended, but you would always want a validator to make sure that, an independent validator to make sure that happens. So there'll always be that role. I don't think any client is going to automatically assume that the result is
but Ethan can probably develop a validator bot in 30 minutes while we're talking, right?
And to be fair, you're already seeing it in the small and medium-sized segments.
Right.
Because Google has PMax, Meta has Advantage Plus, and in the small and medium-sized, if I'm a small business owner, I can do exactly what Ethan showed. I can use creative and media planning and buying tools to implement a program. When you're getting to scale, it gets a bit more difficult, and I think it's much more complicated. So I think there will always be that role at the enterprise level, but I don't think there's any doubt that those relationships, I mentioned Google PMax and Advantage Plus at Meta, those programs are designed for small and medium-sized businesses. I think it's only a matter of time before they expand into the enterprise segment, but there's a coalition there between platform, client, and agency that I think works at that scale and that complexity.
Let me bring back the word that Mary brought up, joy.
Yeah.
So I think no marketer had joy from media buying, right? But the joy was in creative.
Because Mary has the wrong agency.
The creative,
we can provide joy.
But where will the marketers of the future have joy? It's not going to be from validating. You called it. That doesn't sound like a fun activity.
No, but it's from getting the most productive result. I mean, the joy will come from winning and succeeding and being even more effective. I mean, I mentioned these personalization platforms. I mean, this is a huge opportunity. You see it particularly in the streaming segment. I mean, the competition there. And it is quite remarkable that Netflix have been doing this for a number of years, and it's interesting when you present their model to even the most sophisticated technology companies, their eyes widen, and there is some joy that comes through as a result of that. So I think that's where it comes from, or that's where it will come from. And these opportunities are absolutely huge in terms, for example, in Europe with an automotive manufacturer who've been doing this across 27 countries. The old model, in each country, every country head would say, the French car buyer, for example, or the German car buyer, or the Italian, or the Spanish or the British is different. Yeah, I need a green sky with a red car and polka dot tires or whatever it happens to be. And you couldn't do that other by doing it separately. Today you can. You can provide distinct and personalized communication at huge scale almost instantaneously. This is a very different system. The biggest blocker is often the organizational block. Because companies are organized often by country. They often have a country CEO and a country CMO. And that organizational structure may well be a block to centralization, for example, not just in the marketing area, but other areas. So a lot of this has to do with organizational change. And the reason why companies, I think, are slow to adopt is there are inbuilt resistances and frictions that prevent organizational frictions that prevent them from happening.
So as we look toward kind of the next, the multi-agent-based GPT and bots and all of that, what is the right size of a marketing agency?
Well, it's interesting. NVIDIA, I think, it finds it easier to deal with organizations that are sort of 8 to 10,000 or 10 to 12,000 rather than 100,000. And I think there will be great. I said agility was key.
Yep.
And I think agility is a core competence that has to be developed, and scale and size. I mean, Mary, for example, said she put a headcount restriction in after the D-cubed advisory meeting. That sort of response, I think you're going to see increasingly. I think people are sort of stalling on organizational expansion as they see what the implications of these changes are for their organizations. I think the answer to your question is, from a headcount point of view, smaller. I mean, my view, and I don't think it's come up so far in the sessions, is AI a net generator of employment or reducer? My view is it's a net reducer. Yep. What Keynes wrote about almost 100 years ago, he was right about in terms of automation ending up giving us more holidays, but he was 100 years too early. And I think that's the net result of it. I mean, if I look at our industry, if I go through those 5 things for a minute. On visualization and copywriting, less employment. On personalization at scale, the unit price might come down, but the number of assets that will be deploying will increase. So the multiple will be greater, more employment. In the third area, media planning and buying, less. In the fourth area, efficiency, there'll be some gains, some things. Democratization of knowledge, maybe there'll be more opportunity because people will be hugely empowered by what's happening in the organization, and I think there'll be more opportunities as a result.
We have about 2 more minutes.
Sure.
So I want to try to end on a positive note. Of,
Have I been negative?
All of the, my creative people out there, David Ogilvy's, Don Draper, Peggy, that are freaking out from what is happening.
I don't think they're no, I think that's. No, I don't think they're. Well, I mean, journalists may be freaking out. No, I don't think that's true. Actually, I think there are a lot of people. Just for example, take that second area, higher level creative, upper funnel creative, yep. Huge opportunities there. And the big idea is still as relevant as it was in David Ogilvy's time, as it will be, I think, today. It's going to be different, though.
But GPT can give me those ideas, right?
Well,
I can ask GPT to be Ogilvy, Draper.
There's for every person who says, I'll take it from GPT, there are others who say they're not prepared to do that, right? That the human mind might be capable, at least in the near future, of producing better ideas. So there's a balance there. So I think there are significant opportunities there.
So you heard it here first. The human mind, at least in the near future, is still better than AI. That's what we heard, right?
That's right.
Thank you very much.